The ANC's National Executive Committee is set to hold its lekgotla this weekend. Moving SOEs and the Department of Public Enterprises, load shedding and the rising cost of living are some issues that are expected to be discussed. The lekgotla outcomes will then be part of the two-day cabinet gathering that will be convened by President Cyril Ramaphosa for next week. For more on this, we're joined by political analyst Asanda Ngoasheng. Very good evening to you. Thank you so much for your time. I mean, as this lekgotla is set to get underway, what's on the top of the minds of South Africans and business people and ordinary people is the issue of load shedding. How much depth do you imagine will come out of this meeting when it comes to active solutions in tackling load shedding?
I think load shedding is definitely going to be top of the agenda because it has the potential to finally take away power from the ANC even before 2024. We've already seen that the DA had its march, and various other groupings have over the past couple of weeks been hosting their own kind of city shutdowns. We've seen in Queenstown, for example, and various other places, people calling for shutdowns because of Eskom, because of inflation, and because of the state of the economy, and of course the usual high unemployment complaint.
So, as you speak about unemployment, we know that ANC Secretary General Fikile Mbalula also spoke a lot about ways and solutions when it comes to cushioning the poor in South Africa, saying that solutions are underway in terms of incentivizing small, medium and micro enterprises. How much depth do you think will need to come out of that when it comes to looking after those who are really struggling in the country?
I think, the ANC would need a complete rehaul of the economy for them to have real change and real change that South Africans can feel, because for as long as we have an economy that's based on the mineral industrial complex and an economy that prioritizes the employment of men, for example, over women because of its nature, we are going to see high unemployment, and particularly within women and particularly within youth. And it's only when the ANC rethinks the economy, rethinks its approach to the economy, and actually starts implementing some of the policies that already exist in our country. So we know we've got, for instance, the BEE codes of conduct, which set out various, ways in which South Africa can change from a country that excludes the majority from the economy into a country that includes the majority from the economy. And so if we have a government that followed its existing policies, that monitored and evaluated its existing policies, and that actually took the time to ensure, for example, that we have enough labor monitors who are going out and ensuring that employers are, sticking to the law, that they are employing people that they're supposed to employ, and that they're treating employees that are, in employment fairly, and are implementing even these incentives the government puts in place. For example, we've seen that some companies simply take that money and instead of using it to create employment, they just buy themselves more machines, and, some of that money finds its way back into the pockets of the owners rather than doing what it's supposed to do, which is to develop the economy such that there's higher employment. And of course, one of the things that the government is going to have to look at some stage is the ways in which the social grant system is implemented. So it's important that South Africa provides a safety network for people who are unable to get opportunities in the economy and make up for some of the failures. But we cannot have an economy that has an entire frame or its foundation as, a social security outlook. We need an economy that is focused on delivering growth, that is focused on delivering dignity and jobs for people, and we need a minority of citizens to be on the social grant system so that we can free up that money to be able to create the jobs and to be able to deliver an economy that works for the majority of South Africans rather than works for the minority. Because while, poverty is hard, and so nobody's going to say no to money that's coming from social grants, people actually want dignity, people actually want jobs, people want to participate in the economy and to gain and grow their skills and feel empowered as people rather than, looking forward to standing in yet another queue for yet another month for a limited amount that they have, no control over.
Just going back to the importance of load shedding, with it being, with it really going to be important with this meeting, with the lekgotla sitting. In December, at the elective conference, the ANC resolved to move Eskom to the Mineral Resources and Energy Department, which then falls under the party's national chairperson, Gwera Mantashe. Now, on Wednesday, at a symposium held at the University of Johannesburg, we heard ANC Secretary General Fikile Mbalula again defending calls for Mantashe's resignation. What do you think this now would mean in the bigger scheme of things, just really considering the dire impact of load shedding on the country's economy and, of course, on people's day-to-day lives?
I think that, the Minister of Energy's job is to ensure that there is energy production in South Africa, and he has failed, Gwera Mantashe, dismally in doing that. And in fact, he has a track record of actually rather siding with capital against communities. So for example, the Kolobeni, with what happened with mining, and there are many other communities where he has sided with capital rather than people. And we know that there's had to be court cases, for example, to stop the procurement of the big vision of electricity on ships. And there's also the nuclear deal. All of this happened under his watch, and he continued to seek, him and his advisors continued to seek solutions that were ultimately not good for South Africa, not good for the environment, and wasted a lot of time that they could have used looking for solutions that were environmentally friendly, but were also going to deliver the kind of energy generation that the country needed. And so to put, Eskom under his ministry while he is still the minister is really just a sign that we are not going to go anywhere in terms of this Eskom issue. And I think, our government, if they were serious about tackling load shedding, one of the things that they could do, which would be a quick win, is to provide incentives for businesses to be able to sustain themselves in the hours that there isn't electricity. So much like they did during COVID, where they provided incentives for government, for companies to be able to keep going and to pay their employees, they should be providing some, level of funding for ensuring the sustainability of companies, so that companies can buy generators, so that companies can buy solar panels and can buy alternative means of energy generation, so that they can keep their doors open and not increase this already ridiculously high unemployment rate in the middle of a global crisis, because we know that all of this is happening in the context of a global crisis, and we haven't even begun to recover from the decimation of COVID, both as a country and as a globe. And so we're in a situation where we are in a bad place economically, in a state where the world is in a bad place economically. So we can't even say that we can rely on perhaps the fact that the rest of the world is doing okay and they can maybe help us in some ways. Nobody's going to be able to help us because they are dealing with their own issues themselves and unable to kind of, get their own economies on track. So we are really in a scary place as South Africa. And I feel like when each time I hear ANC people speak, they are not fully aware of not only the global, they don't speak as if they are fully aware of the global economic crisis context and their local economic crisis context and implications of an energy crisis that has been going on for 20 years, for almost 20 years, because we've had load shedding since 2007. This is not a new problem. We should have had a solution to it by now. We should never have gotten to where we are. And instead, the ANC went and, bought 25% of Hitachi and then gave themselves a tender through the back door and then came back and stole some more money through state capture and everything that we've heard, in state capture about Eskom. And so the ANC has literally had a series of blunders when it comes to dealing with this issue. And I don't think one weekend intense meeting is going to change anything, because they have shown us, what they're capable of, and they have shown us what they do when given a crisis. And if you look at even what they did during COVID, we know the ANC uses crisis to fatten itself and to fatten its members and to channel the funds towards individuals rather than providing the national solutions that are needed to get us out of the economic and the energy crisis.
What about then the talk of a pending reshuffle? I mean, where does it fall within the agenda of the weekend and its significance? I mean, there was a lot of back and forth about whether or not the Deputy President, David Mabuza, has indeed resigned, with his office saying and dismissing those suggestions, as we know that the ANC is deliberating on what will happen in that space.
Yeah, I mean, we've just had the national conference where new people were elected, so definitely there is an impending cabinet reshuffle. It might happen before SONA, or it might happen immediately or soon after the state of the nation. It remains to be seen when, but it's definitely something that's coming. But what I also want to comment on is the fact that we are seeing a desperate ANC. We are seeing a sense of urgency, a misplaced sense of urgency. I want to put it like that. In the ANC, we saw over this week with the removal of the mayor in with the mayor in Johannesburg, that the premier of Gauteng himself went to oversee the process. This is the first time that we are seeing provincial leaders go so far as sitting in municipal council meetings in order to make sure that the party line is followed. And so it's a very interesting development. And I don't know if it necessarily bodes well for South Africa and our democracy and the ways in which things are meant to happen, with some level of independence between the municipal structures and the provincial structures, for example. We're also seeing that, the ANC, it's becoming very clear to them that they may not survive 2024. And so there's a certain level of desperation. And my fear at this moment is that we may see even bigger, wider scale corruption than we've ever seen in the entire history of the ANC, because if they think that 2024 it's really over and it's going to be the end of them, everybody is literally in the queue to make sure that they're in the line for the last, the biggest looting party ever known to mankind. And we need to prepare ourselves as a country for a national party like state looting, handing over of state land to friends and families, and all kinds of dodgy deals that are likely to happen as the ANC prepares itself to vacate power potentially. And they know that even if they don't lose in 2024, definitely 2029. And so there's still that sense of urgency. And you've seen with the reduction of positions, whether you're talking at municipal level or you're talking at provincial level, and to some extent at national level, because they got, the smallest votes that they've ever gotten, that the gravy train is shrinking and becoming smaller and smaller, but the patronage lines are becoming longer and longer, with more and more people relying on the ANC to be their source of income. So it's going to be very interesting what happens in the next 2 years as we see the ANC either panic and loot and to ensure that whoever comes into power, they leave with nothing, or as they scramble for their own survival and try various tactics to retain the vote. And the opposition's actions, for example, in Johannesburg, are not helping at all. The opposition is showing us that they are not ready for a national government of coalition if they can't even manage a municipal coalition government. And what has happened, for example, in Johannesburg with a minority party that has one seat now becoming the mayor raises questions around the implications for democracy if, the most minority voted party can now become the ultimate leader of Johannesburg. What does that say for the votes that the people of Johannesburg cast, and the implications also for, whether the democracy is being implemented in the way that it needs to? And we need to start thinking about new rules for who can gain what seats and what level of power, is weighted
and
in which way.
If you allow me just to interrupt you very quickly. I mean, minority parties, that's an important discussion. If we had more time, we'd expand on it. But in terms of power and, how much power do you think they have in disorganizing coalitions with their list of demands?
I mean, I think there's a lot of potential for disruption because they have now become kingmakers. And for me, what's really scary is the fact that we are in an era where it's becoming clear that political parties don't have to do the hard work of winning votes in their big numbers in order for them to ascend to power. They just need to actually have a minority and become the kingmakers that can make or break a coalition. And that is a problem problem, because what you want is for political parties to do the things that are necessary to woo South African voters so that they can get the majority vote, so that power and influence are equivalent to the number of voters or the number of people who have voted for you. And while it's important that minorities are represented and that minorities, minority voices are heard and are accounted for, we cannot have the subversion of power wherein minority parties, who very few people can say they voted for, are now going to have a very strong hand in setting the agenda. It can't be that somebody with one seat is now going to be the one who's going to be, delivering the final signature and having such an important role in ensuring that, Johannesburg is driven from a policy perspective in certain ways. And so it's going to be very interesting to see how that pans out and whether it has good or bad implications for democracy and what kind of policy making is going to come from that in terms of future coalition governments and the kind of deals and negotiations that are made. And I think opposition parties are going to have to get their act together and try to figure out how to work better so that South Africans can trust them in 2024 with a government of national unity. Otherwise, we're going to have the ANC yet again, because they will represent stability even as they are corrupt and unreliable.
Yeah. Very well. Thank you so much. Thanks for your time. Asanda Ngoasheng, a political analyst there, giving us a sense of some of the expectations as the ANC's lekgotla takes place this weekend.